Okay, so first of all, I will at least want to show you this quote from Nehemiah. Then we'll talk about Nehemiah. We're skipping around, but the books of Ezra and Nehemiah are related. Nehemiah writes, "And it came to pass when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven and said, I beseech thee, O Lord God of heaven, the great and terrible God that keepeth covenant and mercy for them that love him and observe his commandments. Let thine ear now be attentive and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now day and night for the children of Israel thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which have sinned against thee. Both I and my father's house have sinned." Today in class, remember I record these months before you see them, we talked about the mark, the tau, that in the book of Ezekiel, the people in Jerusalem get, who are not just faithful to God, but who are upset about the unfaithfulness of everyone around them. Notice here how Nehemiah, he ends up being an important figure in the restoration of the temple and in the restoration of Jerusalem, but he's in turmoil. He doesn't just say, well, that's the way things go. He's upset. And like the people who received the mark in the book of Ezekiel, it is this passion. It is this pouring out of love in distress that marks Nehemiah. But who is Nehemiah? Well, Wikipedia has an article on him, which is pretty good. In the 20th year of Artaxerxes, in 445 or 444 BC, Nehemiah was cupbearer to the king. He says that at the end of this first chapter. Learning that the remnant of Jews in Judah, those who were left behind and who were not forcibly deported into Babylon in 586 BC, 150 or so years earlier, learning that the remnant of Jews in Judah were in distress and that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down, he asked the king for permission to return and rebuild the city. We'll be reading about this. Around 20 years after Ezra's arrival in Jerusalem in 468 BC. So Ezra, we were reading the book of Ezra until now. Ezra is a priest or a scribe, and he comes to Jerusalem to help set things up about 20 years prior to Nehemiah. Nehemiah is an official. He's an official who's been serving for the Persians, but whose heart is with the God of the Jews and with his fellow Jews. He's of them. Artaxerxes sent him to Judah as governor of the province with a mission to rebuild, letters explaining his support for the venture and provision for timber from the king's forest. Once there, spoiler alert, Nehemiah defied the opposition of Judah's enemies on all sides, Samaritans, Ammonites, Arabs, and Philistines, and rebuilt the walls within 52 days from the Sheep Gate in the north, the Hananeel Tower at the northwest corner, the Fish Gate in the west, etc. So we will read more about this, but Nehemiah's heart goes out to help the people who are suffering in Jerusalem, and he gets sent as an official, a Persian official, because the Persians officially controlled the Holy Land at this point. They're the empire that have replaced the other empires. Empires rise, empires fall. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, and now the Persians, to be followed by the Macedonians with the Hellenes, with Alexander the Great, and the Romans, etc., etc., etc. But Nehemiah's heart is not with the empire. He doesn't put his eggs in the one basket of worldly power. He is concerned about the remnant of Jews. He is concerned about the people of God, and he wants to help them. That desire is what singles him out. So we've got that. Also, I wanted to mention, I think, sometimes I know what I want to mention. Sometimes it totally skips my mind. Oh, there's this. In Psalm 91, there's a reference that is picked up in the gospel, but this is not the Psalm. This is Zechariah 12. This is God talking. I will pour out on the kingship of David and the population of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication, which is kind of what Nehemiah has, although this is not in Nehemiah's time. So they will look to me, the one they have pierced. They will lament for him as one laments for an only son. And there will be a bitter cry for him like the bitter cry for a firstborn. The scribes didn't know what to do with this passage. How can God be pierced? What's this reference to a firstborn son, an only son, and mourning for him? This is why we are told in the Gospels that when Jesus is, well, first when he's nailed to a cross, but also when he's pierced by the sword of the centurion, we are reminded of Zechariah's prophecy, God speaking, they will look on him whom they have pierced. The implication being the only son, the firstborn son. So that is a powerful foreshadowing prophecy, an image that seems to predict Jesus and that can't be explained in other ways. Because how can God, who is a spirit, be pierced unless he's simply speaking metaphorically? But it's literally when Jesus is around. We read the small section from Hebrews today, and I'm hopping around the various epistles. We only have a few readings and videos left this week. Then the next week is off for the Holy Week break. And then we finish up with the week of Easter. So Easter week will be our final week of readings and videos. So think about Nehemiah's passion. Think about the prophecies. Think about how this stuff works within us, because our theme today in class was, don't read the Bible as if it's code. Read the Bible because it explains the human reaction to an encounter with God. Human nature doesn't change. How do we respond to God? And when we respond in supplication and prayer, which is a grace, we are blessed with having a role, we hope, even though it's a painful one, in salvation history.